Hi, I'm Lisa,
And I'm Becca.
and this is More Than Flowers, honoring Mother's Day with a call to fight for abortion justice.
Well, Mother's Day was a week ago.
I know it was, but if you'll remember, this was originally scheduled to be a live webinar much closer to the holiday. But with everything that's been going on, we decided to change up the format a little bit. So it's not Mother's Day anymore, but the topic's just as important.
Absolutely.
So we are with Reproductive Transparency now, and we are so grateful to have the platform to be able to bring this information to you.
And I'd also say really overwhelmed.
Yeah, I agree. I'm have feelings of sadness, being scared about our future.
Outrage.
Yeah,
And I'm guessing we're not alone.
definitely not. And what we've heard from some of our supporters is that it would be helpful to have a little more information around what's been going on and what we can do about it.
Yeah.
So we're hoping to do that in the next half hour, to share some more details around what's happening and how we move forward.
Let's do it.
So just to give a quick rundown of what we'll talk about in this time is we're going to give a very brief overview of what's currently going on with Roe v. Wade and why this has become such a big issue right now. And then we're also going to talk about the difference between abortion rights and reproductive justice, which is a topic that really needs to get discussed more often, especially in these times.
Right.
And then we'll do an overview at the state level of Illinois and all of its neighbors, followed by some concrete actions you can take now to help make a difference.
That'll be great because I know sometimes it can be hard to hear a lot of information and not know what to do next. So I'm excited for that part.
Yes. And so one really important thing to keep in mind is that this is not meant to be an in-depth analysis on all of the topics that we address here. Instead, think of it more as a jumping off point. There's going to be a lot of important terminology and key words that we'll talk over that will be a great way for you to be able to research the information more on your own. And we'll also be providing a link that will have these resources available to you. So why now? Why is it that everyone is talking about Roe v. Wade right now when it's been over 49 years since that became the law of the land?
Wow.
So Roe v. Wade was an extremely important Supreme Court case because it established the legal right for people to have an abortion up to the point of fetal viability via having the right to privacy. And that's being called into question now as the result of a law that was enacted in 2018 in the state of Mississippi. And Mississippi has only one abortion clinic left, and that's called Jackson Women's Health. And they challenged this law that banned all abortions after 15 weeks back in 2018. And that is why the case that has been heard, and we are waiting for the ruling, is Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization. And because of the nature of this ruling, it could lead to the overturning of the rights established for abortion in Roe v. Wade. And based on the leak of the draft opinion from SCOTUS, it turns out that that's a very likely outcome, that Roe v. Wade will no longer be the law of the land.
That's really scary because I think we've kind of taken for granted all this time that Roe v. Wade was set,
Absolutely, that it's set, it was established, and that, I don't know about you, but often when I have expressed concerns in the past about not being guaranteed these protections under Roe, I've been told that I'm overreacting and that it's fine. And I think we're seeing now, and a lot of people have seen this coming for a long time, that this was never a guarantee. But that's why we're here today, and that's why we are going to work together to fight.
Absolutely.
So before we jump into state level information, it's really, really important for us to take time to make sure we are centering those who are most at risk when the right to an abortion is threatened. And that really is primarily women of color, people of color, people who are poor or have limited financial means. And in some states, it also can disproportionately affect people who are under the age of 18 because they're subject to additional restrictions. So we're going to talk a little bit about the word justice versus the word rights. So Roe v. Wade offers the fundamental protection of bodily autonomy. And that's important. And it is the floor upon which we all stand. But it should not be the ceiling of the rights that we have. We have to remember that just because we have a legal right doesn't mean everybody has a choice, because marginalized communities are still denied access to abortion through various means. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. And so reproductive justice is a framework that was launched in 1994 by an organization now called Sister Song. And it combines reproductive rights and social justice. And we definitely recommend checking out the Sister Song website. And you can read more about how this was started, and the definition is on the screen. It's also important to highlight that there are many, many social issues that are closely related to abortion rights. And that is why this idea of reproductive justice is so important, because there are a lot of intersectional issues. So this list that you see here is not exhaustive. There's more, but things that we especially want to make sure we call out is the idea that abortion rights are related to things like racial justice and equity, gender equity, climate and environmental justice, economic justice, the ability to build safe and healthy communities, Black maternal health, sexual health, and a topic that Becca and I are especially passionate about, crisis pregnancy centers and their harmful medical misinformation.
I think what is so great about this slide is it really does show that it's not just about abortion rights. So if climate is important to you, if maternal health is important to you, abortion rights are also important to you.
Absolutely. And one of the speakers at a rally we were at last weekend mentioned, for example, as it pertains to environmental justice, is you can't be against abortion access and claim to be an advocate of environmental justice, because these abortion bans will have the effect of forcing people to travel hundreds of miles by car, by plane, whatever they have to do to access abortion, when they should be able to get it right in their own community.
Right, right.
So Reproductive Transparency Now is based in Chicago, Illinois. And so we decided that we wanted to talk about our home state as well as the states surrounding us, because there are a lot of states that are in the news right now, and that's very important that they are. But we also need to understand what's going on around us, because Illinois is going to be heavily impacted by the activities of nearby states. And that doesn't get talked about enough.
Yeah, I agree. I think many times I'll hear people say, oh, well, Illinois is pro-choice, so what do we have to worry about? And I think, well, that's great. Yes, we might be pro-choice, but we can't sit back and think everything's fine just right here. And as I know you'll get into, it's not safe either.
Exactly. This is an issue that you'll see and we'll highlight it as we go through some of the states of why this is important. So we are so lucky that Illinois is favorable towards abortion, because some of these states are very hostile on this issue. And as a result, Illinois is going to become a destination. So another issue that we want to talk about before we dive into individual states is this idea of abortion clinics versus crisis pregnancy centers, or CPCs. And the reason we want to highlight this, number one, it's extremely relevant to the idea of abortion access. And it will also become even more relevant as states begin to restrict abortion access and the anti-abortion movement works to ensure that folks are not getting the care they need. And so for the states that we're reviewing here, what's really interesting to see is, based on our research on these states in this region, there are 64 abortion clinics, which seems like a decent number, although I would argue it's way too low.
Right.
Way too low. But then compare that to how many anti-abortion crisis pregnancy centers are in these same states. 527. That means for every one abortion clinic, there are 8 anti-abortion centers claiming to be there to help people make decisions about their pregnancy outcomes.
It's outrageous, because when I think about that 527 number, that's 527 opportunities times the number of people that walk in, that their time to get access to an abortion is delayed, the amount of misinformation and disinformation they're getting. It just is exponentially dangerous with each one that exists.
Yeah. And we're not going to talk in this program specifically around crisis pregnancy centers, but it is what Reproductive Transparency Now is dedicated to doing, and there will be more programs about it. So when we look at Illinois, we're starting here because it is our home state, but also because of all of the states surrounding. It's really the only one that we can consider to be favorable towards abortion access. And so a few things to think about when you think of Illinois is that it is now, and will be even more so, a destination for abortion seekers. We saw an influx of patients after Texas SB 8 was enacted. And as more states restrict access, and if the Supreme Court allows this to continue by overturning Roe, this will become more and more extreme. And so Illinois providers, volunteers, and activists are working very hard to make sure that we're ready for the increase in volume of patients that are coming to our state. And a couple of terms that are helpful to understand more about and what makes Illinois a pro-choice state include the Reproductive Health Act, which was passed in 2019, which protects the right to an abortion and other reproductive health care. And also the Youth Health and Safety Act, which goes into effect actually in just a couple of weeks from now, on June 1st, 2022. And that one's really important to understand because it changes one of the current abortion laws, which was really the last piece of legislation that needed to get repealed to make Illinois a truly pro-choice state. And that is that right now, parental notification is required. And once the Youth Health and Safety Act goes into effect, that will no longer be the case. Parental notification will not be required, which opens up a lot more access to abortion seekers under the age of 18. So you can also read more in detail about Illinois' current abortion laws on abortionfinder.org. We won't go through all the details here, but you will see some comparable numbers as we go through the presentation. So now let's take a little look at our neighbor to the north, Wisconsin. So something that is really interesting about Wisconsin is that it is one of 9 states in the US with an unenforced pre-Roe abortion ban.
What does that mean, unenforced?
So it is an abortion ban that was put in place, enacted, but then essentially invalidated by the passing of Roe v. Wade. So this law is still on the books, but it can't be enforced as long as Roe v. Wade is the law of the land. But if Roe gets overturned, they revert back to that initial ban. So to give an idea, right now in Wisconsin, abortion is banned after 21 weeks, 6 days from the first day of your last menstrual period. And with this old law, this pre-Roe law, it would become a total, almost nearly total ban. And so you have to ask yourself, there's a near total ban on abortion. Where are people going to go? Because abortions won't stop. They just become more difficult to get.
Right. We go back to the climate change, the access, and how much more difficult it's going to be, especially in minority communities and those in underserved communities as well.
Absolutely. And a lot of these people, right, will then have to travel to Illinois, potentially Minnesota or Iowa. And what does that mean? That means it takes longer to get your abortion. It means it's going to cost more. If it costs more, it takes more time to get the money. And it becomes a vicious cycle, which leads to, by the way, abortions will need to be performed later in pregnancy, which is probably what I would consider an unintended consequence of the laws these anti-abortion activists are getting passed.
Right.
Now, furthermore, another issue that's exacerbating this is there's only a certain amount of capacity to take on patients in the pro-choice states like Illinois.
Right. When you go back to that chart of, just one abortion clinic to every 8 CPC, that number seems even smaller now.
Yep.
And
it means longer wait times before you can get an appointment, which then again leads to having to wait to get your procedure till later in pregnancy, which requires more money and frankly creates unnecessary risks.
Right.
So this is something to really think about as we go through the different states. So now let's go over to Michigan. Similar to Wisconsin, they also have a pre-Roe unenforced abortion ban that was actually passed in 1931. And if Roe is overturned, Michigan reverts back to that law. And it basically is up to the individual attorneys general to decide whether or not to enforce. So even though they have a Democratic governor, she can't tell all the different elected officers what to do. So you're going to see a lot of variation by community. And something else in terms of abortion laws, right, to remember is they have a 24-hour waiting period, which means potentially having to stay overnight in places anyway.
Right. Every hour, every day of waiting is more meals they need to find, more lodging they need to find, more hours, just time and money that people do not have to spend.
Right. And shouldn't
have to, and should not have to.
Right. So then we get to Indiana. Indiana is a tough state on this front. They have a Republican supermajority. They have an anti-abortion governor, and they have a long track record as a state of attempting to pass abortion bans. And of course, the existence of Roe v. Wade has helped prevent that from happening.
Thankfully.
Yep. For now, based on the location of Indiana and its neighboring states, according to the Guttmacher Institute, we can expect most likely almost all of the patients seeking abortion in Indiana under a total ban to come to Illinois. Again, creates longer wait times and all these issues we've already talked about.
Right.
Now, Kentucky has been in the news recently because they did successfully pass a 15-week abortion ban as recently as April of this year. So last month, about a month ago, they did pass a 15-week abortion ban, and it was in effect for about a week. A federal judge issued a temporary restraining order, which allowed services to resume. But that's just temporary, and a lot will depend on what happens with Roe. And so, as you think about, these immediate threats, this is one. This goes back to when we were concerned about Roe and the future of it as a law, what would happen? We were not overreacting. In Missouri, they have a trigger law in place. It's one of 13 states with a trigger law, which means they have been preparing for the overturning of Roe.
They've been working hard.
They have been working hard on this. Okay? And this means that essentially, if Roe is overturned, the state certifies that that has happened, and they put an abortion ban into effect. Now, the interesting thing about Missouri is there is only one abortion clinic in that entire state, even now. It's in St. Louis, and people seeking abortion in Missouri already, for the most part, are being split between Illinois and Kansas because there is not enough capacity in Missouri with only one clinic available.
Right. So they're already seeing this struggle.
Yes.
It's so unfortunate that that they have done this. And the fact that there's a 72-hour waiting period is even more incredible.
Yeah. Because that's 72 hours between when you first go in and do some sort of in-person counseling. You have to wait 72 hours and then go back for your procedure.
Wow. And that's 3 days of meals, lodging, maybe childcare.
Very likely childcare. Because one of the reasons why we wanted to do this program, right, for Mother's Day,
right,
is because according to Guttmacher, about 60% of people who get abortions already have at least one child. So these are people who are parents who need this care and are being forced to stay away from their kids because of these unnecessary laws.
Right.
And then finally we get to Iowa. And Iowa has a very recent history of attempts to pass anti-abortion laws, which include a heartbeat law, which is something around a 6-week ban, as well as a 72-hour waiting period. Fortunately, in 2018, both of those were blocked. In our research, one thing that's really interesting to call out, and I think speaks to how difficult this can be to navigate, is that the Iowa Department of Health provides biased information, and I would say that it is definitely anti-abortion in nature, on its website, and even incorrectly stating that parental consent is required for minors getting an abortion when the actual law is parental notification, which is a lower bar.
Right. Yeah. A parental consent, parental notification seems a little like legal jargon. So what is the difference?
So consent means you need permission. Notification means you have to tell them. There has to be a record that they were notified.
They were notified, but they don't necessarily have to agree or give permission.
Correct.
I see. Okay. So, wow. So for a government department, a state's department to have the wrong information is just incredible. It's not okay.
And it makes it confusing to know what the rules are.
Right. You want to trust that that's the source of correct information.
And so this really goes back to why it's really important to make sure you're using credible, reliable sources for that type of information. And we will share with you what we've found to be reliable. So the place to go to get links to the materials we shared here is the URL is bit.ly/row-may12. It might be easier to scan the QR code here with the camera app on your phone, or follow us on social media. We've got our Repro Transparency social media handles here. We are always posting, information and links of this nature. And now I think this is probably the slide
I've been waiting for.
Good. Well, we're about to tell you what you should do. These are some really solid actions you can take right now. Really, 5 things come to mind, right? One is, at a time like this, it's really important to support your local abortion fund. There are abortion funds all across the country who have been working hard for years to provide financial and practical support to people seeking abortion, whether it's in state or out of state. So go to the National Network of Abortion Funds website, and you can find an abortion fund near you that you can support financially, or if they're looking for volunteers, you can volunteer. There's no shortage of work to be done in this area. Also, consider supporting your local independent abortion clinics. Indie clinics provide a majority of abortion procedures in the US, and they need our support. And so for that, you can visit the Abortion Care Network. On your own, it's going to be really important to learn about self-managed abortion and abortion pills by mail. Abortion pills are safe, they are effective, and you can get them mailed to you. Some states, this is easier than in others, and these legal rights are likely going to be changing. So in the meantime, we recommend the Plan C website, so plancpills.org, where you can learn more about the details of this and share the information with others. And then, of course, if you or someone you care about is looking for an abortion provider, make sure you're using a credible directory to find a licensed abortion provider. Two that we like a lot are abortionfinder.org and ineedana.com. Make sure you're using that to identify the right places so you don't end up accidentally at a crisis pregnancy center. And then, of course, like what we were doing earlier today, participating in local abortion justice efforts. Find organizations you trust, volunteer, get involved, talk about abortion, say the word abortion, make your voice heard, help reduce the stigma associated with abortion that has really gotten us into a lot of this mess.
Right. I love this last one, not only because we just did it, but also it's been a great way to get my anger out and to do that with other people who feel the same. That's been some relief in this mess.
It's very powerful to see so many people mobilized and activated, potentially after years of not really knowing what to do or understanding what was coming. And then, of course, if you're in the Chicago area, Reproductive Transparency Now is always looking for potential supporters and volunteers. So we protest crisis pregnancy centers on an ongoing basis here in our Chicagoland area. And so you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or visit our website where we keep lots of resources where you can learn more about CPCs and how they are threatening what is left of abortion justice in the US and what we're going to do to help combat what they are creating.
I consider them, the anti-abortion's best kept secret.
Absolutely. And in the last few months, word has definitely gotten out more, but it requires focus at a local level so that the community is aware that CPCs are there, because not everybody's going to read reports that come out or op-eds that come out. That's just not how information ends up getting disseminated.
And there's something enjoyable about sharing the truth about a place like a CPC with a giant sign and a friend.
Yes, definitely. So with that, thank you. I hope you enjoyed the program. Reach out, via social media or website to learn more. And we look forward to bringing more content in the future.